What's up, friends? Welcome to SPDM TV. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I watch a lot of TV. We talk about various TV topics, reviews, and general appreciation of TV, past and new. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Serialized at MLHilt2452 to see what all I'm watching. This week, we are going to be talking about TV villains, and putting this list together was excruciating for a variety of reasons. But also, it's a little illuminating as to some of the blind spots that I have when it comes to TV villains. So I'm excited to have this conversation. He is the host of the Noise Report. He's guested on numerous other shows, soon to be part of the crew with The Loud List. I've got CJ playing back on the show. CJ, welcome. Well, welcome
Yeah,
back. Welcome to this
right.
show. Welcome back. This is our third recording together. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going great, man. I've been looking forward to this one. This is this is a list that I love. I love a good thing, and it'll be a good introduction for the loud list. It'll give people an idea of exactly what they're going to see and hear on the show. So,
So, did you have a process for kind of what to you defines a great TV villain?
so I think it's one of three things for a great TV villain. One, they got to just be the complete, just total nasty, nasty guy. Or they have to play it in a way that is really off kilter and kind of almost makes you love them, even
Hmm.
though you know you're supposed to hate them. Or the third option is going to be where you're kind of that combination of both,
Hmm.
where, yeah, just the complete evil, nasty dude, but there's still that part of you that puts a spin on it in such a way that it makes you kind of respect and love them. So,
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
I hear you there. So because I made the list, and what I did was that I just thought of all the ones from the TV shows that I've watched, and I'm like, okay, I remember this guy, I remember this guy, I remember this person. I do that with any of these lists, but every time I do that, I realize that if I don't put parameters or structure in there and kind of have some type
Hmm.
of filtering system, my list is going to be super long. That's why my mixed CD podcast
Hmm.
is only 80 minutes, because otherwise I'm just going to be throwing shit on
Yeah.
there, and then the list is going to be never ending, which, granted, not a problem at the end of the day, but also I need that structure sometimes. So I took a
Hmm.
look and I tried to see, did I have any structure with this? And the answer is not really. But the things that I know I kind of did on my list was that we could have made an entire list of this just with comic book TV show villains and that. And I,
And oddly enough, I only have
yeah,
one person comic
well,
book on my
my
list.
original list had more, but I had to whittle it down eventually because I'm like, I can't just have comic book villains in this. So comic book villains make up my bottom, like, because did you make a list of 15? Because I made a list of 15.
I did 15, yep.
Okay, so my 15 through 11 are comic book villains because I was like,
That's cool.
I can't I can't in good graciousness put them high on the list when they're already part of another property, because some of them have been in movies, some of them have been in, or a lot, all of them have been in comics. So I gave a little bit more sway to some of the people who are just original
Hmm.
for this. So those are the ones that I kind of that's one way that I structured it. And then another thing too is that the longer that you're a villain, like the more seasons you're a villain, the higher up you go on
Hmm.
my list. Because
Yeah.
this isn't to say that a villain who has only been part of a series for one season doesn't make a huge impact. Because I have a couple in
Right.
here where it's like, yeah, you were only in like a season, season and a half, but you're still
Yeah.
pretty bad. And some of the things that I look for in a villain, I'm just looking for someone that's just like pure evil. Just like
Yeah.
one way or another, they're they're pure evil. There's certain things that I know for me are ones that kind of vault you to the top. Like you do anything with sexual assault and you're going towards the top because I just
Right.
can't do that for me. And there's also something to be said about someone who's just super manipulative as well.
Right.
That's just something that irks me a lot because you see that all the time with people. You see that with politics, you see that with the news, you see that with individuals who they will just say and just spin words however they want in order to get to their end result, which is ultimately us just suffering because somebody says something like an asshole. So
Right.
those were things that I kind of took into account. I do have a bunch of honorable mentions as well, but I also noticed that there is one network in particular that is very well represented in my list, but we'll get to that soon enough. So, CJ, do you have anything else that you wanted to say before we jump into our list?
So people will notice a recurring theme with the majority of mine. I have at least one on here that people are going to be like, wow, that's a way back one. But I agree for the most part with you. Like there's going to be a few on here that cover the sexual assault thing. There's going to be a few on here that are just well known for being baddie baddies. And there's a couple on here that may or may not be considered a villain by some people, but in the true sense of what they were, they definitely were a villain per se.
I had a couple of those
So
people that ended up in my honorable mentions because like, could you consider them a villain? And just like, yeah, absolutely. There's one in particular on here in my honorable mentions that I'm looking forward to
so
kind
with
of
that said,
chatting with you about.
okay, so with that said, since you have honorable mentions and I don't, go ahead and start with your honorable mentions and before we start the actual
Sure,
number
sure.
thing. So
So here are some of my honorable mentions. Oh, and the other rule that I had is that one villain per show. Like there was a couple shows that
yeah,
I thought about it. I really did, but
yeah,
I couldn't in good consciousness put in a
yeah.
villain from like
No,
a
there
villain
were
from multiple shows, but or multiple villains from one show. But it was tough. Admittedly, it was very tough because there will be one here that's like, oh, I see. That's got to be the one where, oh,
yeah,
you got to
there
have.
were a couple where they definitely had multiple villains, and I kind of chose who I thought was the reigning heavyweight,
Yeah. Oh,
so to
yeah.
speak.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
So here are my.
there's at least two shows on my list
Oh, nice.
that fall under that.
So, for my honorable mentions, my first honorable mention is Sauron from the Rings of Power. Now, I don't particularly
Okay.
think the Rings of Power is a very good show. However, particularly second season, Sauron is just the master of deceit that he's known as, and just everything that he does with Celebrimbor making the rings. It was chilling, and Charlie Vickers, who's the guy that plays Sauron, does a fantastic job of that. So, wanted to give him an honorable mention. I picked the governor from The Walking Dead. Negan was very close to making my list, but I'm not a huge fan of The Walking Dead trying to make Negan like not a good guy, but try to redeem him somehow. Because listen, you bash Glenn's head in. Oh, and I guess spoilers, I suppose. But you bash Glenn's head in. That's not something that you can come back from.
Spoiler alert. Right.
So
And that's the thing. Like there's going to be characters where absolutely they've done things that even if you try to redeem them, they still did those things. And
yeah.
I have seen the first season
Oh,
of
my bad.
the first one, the Sauron one. I haven't seen the second season yet, so
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
not
well,
aware of what happens in the second season. I
I
kind
didn't.
of
I didn't spoil
no, no, it's
anything bad, but
it doesn't matter if you do because I'm one of them things where I'm one of them people where I'll watch something over and over and over, even knowing already what happens. Like, for example, Sons of Anarchy, I've watched that like probably 9 times.
mhm.
So, I love to. rewatch stuff if I.
Well, and speaking of Sons of Anarchy, I did have Clay Morrow in my honorable mentions for Sons of Anarchy.
Okay.
And the tricky thing with putting Clay on versus some of the other characters is that look, Clay didn't always start off as like a bad guy per se. He, depending on your perspective, he
Yeah.
was the leader of the club at the beginning, and then as more and more secrets are uncovered and you kind of see the way that he operates, yeah, he's not a good person. You could pick a ton of other people from the Sons of Anarchy shows and you'd be correct. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was one for me that I was like, I should put Clay on there. I have two villains that are more concepts. So I have racism in from Watchmen directly. So and
Okay.
American capitalism from the Americans because I was
Okay.
trying to think I was trying to think of something outside the box and I was like,
Right.
oh, I'm gonna get cute and do something like this. And then once I put together my list, I'm like, yeah, I can't pull that shit. I can't justify that at all. I got Errol Childress, who is from True Detective season one. Since True Detective is an anthology series, you don't really you don't really get a sense of who someone is until you like look a little closer to that
Mhm.
situation. So, and again, that's just one season, whatever. I put Eric Cartman from South Park on the list.
He almost made my list.
Yeah,
Very, very close.
he wasn't always like, and is he a villain all the time? No, but he has
Right.
gotten progressively worse throughout the course of the entire
I say
show.
he's a villain in the truest sense of the.
Yeah, for sure. So I
He's
I
as
had
much of a villain as that show has.
oh yeah, yeah. So I had him as he originally was on my list proper, but he was my last one out because I was like I can't put Eric Cartman in this group of villains. And then my last one, this is the one that I was most conflicted with because I could do a coin toss with a lot of different people, but the only show that shows up twice in my honorable mentions and in my list proper is Game of Thrones because there's a ton of people that you could choose from Game of Thrones. And the one that I have in my honorable mentions is Cersei Lannister because
Okay.
yeah, Cersei Lannister is pretty despicable for all the shit she pulls,
Yeah.
especially towards the latter half of the season, latter half of the show's run. Even just some of the shit that she pulls in season one is pretty bad. Uh,
Right.
but when they go off book, that's when things start to crank into gear pretty bad, and that's when it's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about a lot of this that's happening right
Right.
now. So that those are my honorable mentions. Yeah, so I get let's go ahead and get into our list proper. So TJ, why don't you go first? You're the guest, so let's. I've been talking a
So
lot about my honorable mentions. So who's
no, it's good.
who's your, I guess, for lack of a
So
better word,
for
number
number
15?
15,
Yep.
I chose Lucretia, which is Lucy Lawless from Spartacus. So she's, your Roman politician's wife, underhanded, evil, sort of. She was sort of the female version of what's his face from Game of Thrones, Baelish.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
she was sort of the female version of Baelish,
Got it.
almost
So,
from
you
Game of
know,
Thrones. So
a master
uh,
whispers
yeah,
always got little
yeah,
birdies.
used sex extensively to manipulate multiple people, both female and male. She really was a, you know, very underhanded, manipulative, evil character at heart. You know, played the perfect wife in the face of people, but was the complete opposite, behind the scenes. So she's my number 15.
Spartacus is a show that it is Spartacus and all of its spin-offs. Those are on my watch list. There's too much
They're bringing
TV.
it back. There's going to be another whole season
Oh,
of
nice.
it. So,
There's way too much TV out there right now, so it's hard
yeah.
to keep up. So that's that's a great pick, and I'm looking forward to eventually watching that and confirming whether or not, yeah, I agree with that. So one thing upon kind of looking at my list is also I feel my list is pretty basic. It's like, yeah, no shit, all these people would end up on your list. There's a couple on here. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. So my number 15, this almost feels like a cheat because depending on which series you watched, not always a villain, but I'm an X-Men fan through and through. And this is again where all my comic book supervillains
Yep.
come in. But I have Magneto at number 15 specifically from
Okay.
the original animated series run. And the reason why I picked Magneto is because it's Magneto. It's sure I could pick some of the other villains like Apocalypse or, well, Apocalypse, but Magneto is the
Mhm.
one that you can't help but think sometimes like, I don't know, man, guy's got a point. You know,
Right.
he's got some interesting things to say until you get to the like genocide part and the superiority piece. But
You know,
given everything that he went through as well as a survivor of the Holocaust, yeah, you kind of can't blame him for feeling that way about humanity. And it's just the stark difference between what he experienced versus what Charles Xavier experienced, having a life of privilege, and then even though it's not directly from the TV show, but I remember in
mhm,
X-Men First Class when Charles says they're just following orders, and then Eric just looks at him and is like, I've been at the mercy of people who's following orders. It's like never again. And he says stuff like this constantly throughout the series. And between the X-Men being like my superhero comic, like I don't read comics anymore or anything like that, but they are my my main story, my main characters. Magneto is a character that kind of stands head and shoulders as somebody who's got a very interesting and tragic backstory while also kind of raising the bar in terms of, yeah, this guy's got some good points actually about how humanity is broken and we
right.
getting back to a place of civilization is just not possible. I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but it's just very hard to get to that point, especially with
It
everything that he's experienced.
sometimes the courts fail. Sometimes the law fails. And again, I am not
I
condoning killing anyone. Okay. But you can kind of just, like Magneto said, you understand that sometimes
You got to take
a
drastic
line has
steps.
to be drawn
Yeah.
and you get tired of looking at the chaos. You get tired of looking at the carnage and the thing. And people have different motivations. Some
Yeah.
people are can walk away from it and be like, I'm okay with it. And some people aren't, and they'll take action and
Yeah.
they'll pay for it. I mean, hey, the man's going to pay for it one way or another.
Right.
He knew that. There's no way you do what he did and know that eventually they're not going to come for you.
Yep. Who is your number 14?
So this one is going to be kind of controversial because this
Okay.
is a character that most people are going to say he's not a villain. If you ever watch this TV show, he was absolutely a fucking villain. He was just a massive raging asshole in every sense of the word. For 14, I have Frank Gallagher from Shameless, William Macy. Frank terrorized that family, terrorized
I
everyone
could
around
see
him.
where you're coming from
You
with that
know,
because
so in the traditional sense of the word, was Frank really a villain? No, he wasn't a killer. He wasn't blah blah blah, but
the number he did
definitely
on
wasn't a
those
good guy.
the number he did on a lot of those kids, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
he was not a good guy. Okay, he was, like he was the baddie. Like he was the one everyone hated. Everyone just sort of tolerated. All of the schemes and shit that he pulled. He was the villain. I
yeah.
mean, so I treat him as such. And again, like you said in the beginning, they tried to redeem him at the end, but it was after the chaos of what he did to Carl, what he did to, the youngest kid and everything else, man. Just, it was
It's rough
horrible.
shit. It's rough
Yeah.
shit.
Great
So
show
so
though.
as a kid who didn't really grow up with the father,
Mm.
And now, as a father myself, I really struggle with shows where a father treats their kids
Mm.
poorly. Because it's like, on one end, you could see how frustrating it can be a parent sometimes because
Mhm.
it's hard. It's really hard. And for you to be on 24/7 with your kids, you're nobody's perfect. You're eventually going to
Right.
slip and you're going to say something that you regret or whatever with that. But for certain characters to see just some of the things that as parents they do, I do have one, I think one for sure, one parent on my list that we'll get to at some point, but that's but there is something where it's like, huh, like how could you treat your kids in such a deplorable
Yeah.
way? But you know, who are we to say how some people parent, I guess. So,
I
but
mean,
yeah, that's a great pick because from that perspective, yes, like just because you are like a main character does not absolve you from the fact that you are probably considered a villain in most conventional
right.
definitions of what that means.
And Frank is, when I said the three kinds, Frank is sort of that third one
Mhm.
of he's not the pure evil, but he's not like the one you really sort of makes you love him at the same time.
Yeah.
So he's sort of that floats between doing really bad shit and then every once in a while he'll say something or do something that just a little flicker of lighter hope, and then he goes back and he's just kind of floating. So
Right. All right. So my next one, I have I have Kilgrave from Jessica Jones. First of all, David Tennant is just so smarmy and just like disgusting in this role. But this is one where even though you don't see that
right.
he's like sexually assaulting these people, like it's just heavily implied. And it's also just like a metaphor for what it means for individuals to, be manipulative and
Mhm.
to use like substances to their benefit. But it's only like even though he was only in like one season proper, the resounding effects that he has on Jessica throughout the course of the whole show is just horrendous. And
Right.
then not only that, there's have you seen Jessica Jones? Yeah, so that first season when Jessica is getting a sense like I think this guy's back somehow.
Right.
But that scene at the police department where she like comes face to face with him and all of these cops are just have like guns pointed at each other because that's his power. That's what he can do.
Right.
It's chilling just how one person can just have such a profound effect on other people with their words. So it's it's chilling, it's disturbing, and just David Tennant just plays that role so goddamn well. And I hate him for it, but I also love him because David Tennant is just a fantastic performer as well.
Right. He was definitely, he was on my initial list. I started with a list that was 25, sort of whittled it down, got to my final 15.
Yeah.
The other ones were just they were good, but for some reason or another, I don't think they lived up to who I had for, you know, my top 15. And again, subjective because, the great thing about these lists are they're subjective.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Even when you say greatest of all time, sometimes greatest of all time is simply going to be non-negotiable. When you get to, for example, greatest TV themes of all time, just very quickly, random, there is without a doubt, you're going to put the theme for MASH in there because it just simply is. Now, it may not be in your favorite, but you can't make a list of the greatest theme songs for TV without putting the MASH theme in there.
Mhm.
It's just one of the first ones that people think of. Same with Golden Girls. So there's going to be those that are just kind of there. And then there's going to be ones that mostly are subjective. I got a lot of ones on my list coming up for the show that I'm doing later this week that people are going to be like, really? That one? But it's nostalgia factor for me. And we're doing favorites, not greatest of all time. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
had that thing. And that's what this list is, again, little subjective because you may like one genre more than another. I like a certain genre over another. So where somebody will absolutely put Kilgrave, I don't connect to comic book stuff as much. I watch it
That's
on occasion, but
that
that's enough
that's
to
that's completely fair. I can't I
right.
can't
So,
I can't fault
you know,
anyone for that, especially considering how oversaturated it is right now. So, which is
you'll start seeing a recurring theme
mhm,
of what I like to watch.
mhm,
So, you'll understand
where
the
your list.
mentality of why I watch the majority of what I watch.
Got it.
It'll be like, oh, okay, you like this.
Gotcha. All right. Who's your number 13?
So for this one, this is the way back one.
Okay.
This is going to be for Gen X. This is going to be for those of us that are 45 and up. There was a TV show. It was on for 2 seasons, 1984. It was a TV show called V.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It was the character Diana, which was played by Jane Badler. She was basically the female leader of the aliens that were an
Mhm.
invasion. She was a baddie, but what really set her apart, there was one scene at the end of season one where the aliens presented themselves as human, but in the tussle, her skin gets ripped off and it reveals that they're basically lizard people.
Okay.
And she essentially picks up this giant rat and just one bite, So it was like, whoa! You remember now, this was 1984. So, it was, whoa, like she just ate this giant fucking rat that's the size of a lawnmower tire, right? And
Mhm.
it set her apart. And then the second season, it fizzled out really bad. And it sort of ended season two on a cliffhanger and they never renewed it. And it's one of them series like, I have another idea for TV shows that need to be rebooted. This is near the top of my list for that because this is a TV show that just, with all the comic book stuff that's been done, with all the sci-fi stuff that's been done since then, this is a show that would fit right in there with like the Bright movie that Will Smith did. It would fit right in there with other, you know, Troll Hunter and shit like that, of that sort of sci-fi alien genre that could be done so well now. So that's 13. She's referred to by her first name, Diana.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah,
If
I've
you go back and watch the series, it's still floating around. It's just the letter V.
yeah, and
So
I've definitely heard of the show. I've never seen it. It's on my
yeah.
list of things to
It's an
watch.
old school, Like I
Yeah,
said, I'm going to the Wayback Machine for that one because you know, wasn't around long and didn't get major ratings or anything. So,
right, right.
but great show at the time, man. So different than everything else that was on. Like,
All right, my number 13. Again, we've got three more comic book villains, and then we're done. I've Kingpin from Daredevil, and it's mainly Vincent D'Onofrio. Like Vincent D'Onofrio's performance in this is chilling, particularly in the Netflix version of Daredevil, mainly because he is a brute of a man who has got a hair trigger temper, and he is just ruthless through and through. You know, for a guy who is, you know, very media savvy and who can kind of manipulate his way through like the media and political life and different things like that. Just when when you kind of see some of his backstory, it's like, yeah, no wonder you're so fucked up. Like, yeah, that's completely understandable. But also, when you first watch Daredevil and the first time that you see Wilson do something like really violent involving
mhm.
involving a car door, it's like, oh shit, like this is
Right.
not your typical comic book or comic book TV show villain. And for him in particular, his longevity, because he was he's not just in Daredevil, he is in three other shows as well. So
Yeah. So I have I have him on my list higher, and I actually had to choose for him. I chose between this and another show where he plays a villain as
okay.
well. And I chose this one just because a little bit more of a heavyweight in this one than he is in the other one. So, we'll get to my opinions of him
Yeah,
for a little.
Vincent D'Onofrio plays a
Brilliant actor,
fantastic villain in TV
brilliant.
and in movies. Like I will I'm not particularly fond of the movie The Cell, but that doesn't still change the fact that he's just chilling and disturbing
Yeah.
in that in every stretch of the imagination. Everybody remembers the private pile parts from Full Metal Jacket. You know,
As
even
a military person, I've practically, what is your major malfunction? I'm nuts.
right, right.
Yeah, that's one of the movies that I have pretty much memorized that whole spiel, because I love Stanley Kubrick. Like Kubrick is just one of them fucking mad geniuses when it comes to movies that his shit is so twisted, so dark, so weird. Whether it's, 2001 Space Odyssey, whether it's Clockwork Orange, whether it's fucking, you know, Full Metal Jacket, whether it's Scanners, there's always some dark
Yeah,
twist to his shit and of
right.
the human condition and spirit. So
No, I definitely hear you there. So, all right, what is your number 12?
for number 12, I have V from Orange is the New Black.
B was a very hard cut for
Yeah.
me. Like I
Oh,
in reality I should have put her in my honorable mentions, but
only one season, but she really was
impact. It's
the
that
Tom.
impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like she was the consummate bad guy in everything she did. Her ending was the true villain's death per se. So yeah, Lorraine Toussaint played a brilliant
Mm.
character, and of all the villains that show had, she was, I think, the
She
best.
she
Probably my
towers.
favorite.
She clearly
So
towers above
yeah,
everybody from that just because of the way that she just her influence with
right.
a lot of the people in the show. Yeah, it's just that's a great pick. Yeah.
So that's my number 12.
My number 12, I don't feel like I have to say much about this because my number 12 is the Joker specifically from Batman the Animated Series. Now, I'm gonna go out on a limb. We've been recording enough times where I feel like I could be a little vulnerable with you at times, right? I think Mark Hamill's Joker is the best version of the Joker, and he's done it the longest. He within itself he's put his own spin on the Joker, and
Right.
it really depends on what shade of the Joker you like the best,
Hmm.
because do you like the manic, violent, version of the Joker? Do you want someone who's like just kind of off his rockers and is just like kind of crazy, but like kind of a clown, funny type of person? Or do you want
Right.
someone that kind of splits the difference? And that's
Right.
kind of where I put Mark Hamill's version of the Joker
Right.
from Batman the Animated Series. Again, the Joker just feels like a cheat code when it comes to all of these
Yeah.
villain rankings. But just specifically in Batman the Animated Series, he's so good in that. And he played the Joker for a long time, even dipped into video games as well. Those
Hmm.
Arkham Asylum and Arkham City
Right.
games are fantastic. And Mark Hamill is great in both of those as well. So for longevity and for the cheat code that is the Joker, that's my number 12. So I don't feel like we need to say anything else because it's the fucking Joker, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I figured it would come in somewhere,
yeah.
you know.
So all right, you're number 11.
So my number 11 was one of your honorable mentions. I actually have Clay Morrow. I knew Clay was going to be the villain right out of the gate eventually. They may not have portrayed it right at the beginning, but all the signs were there that he was going to be the one to really sort of turn on the club or, tear the club apart. He was going to put the stuff in motion that would lead to the downfall of the club per se. So yeah, and it's Ron Perlman. You got to love Ron. Ron is another one who has the ability to really kind of play a goofy, funny character or a toughie or sort of grades in between. I don't think the guy's ever going to win an Oscar. He doesn't need to. He's very good at what he does. There are those actors who they do what they do.
Yep.
Jason Statham, for example, I refer to him as the ACDC of movies. You know exactly what you're going to get. His song doesn't really ever change, but we love it anyways because we know exactly what we're going to get. When you go to a Jason Statham movie, you don't have to worry about Is this going to be a comedy? Is it going to be a romance? He's going to kick somebody's ass. You're going to say, hell yeah. And then you're going to go home. So, and the same with AC/DC. You're going to get that big guitar riff. You're going to say, hell yeah. And then you're going to be done and listen to something else. So I like that. Like sometimes you just want something that
Mhm.
and yeah. So
Well, let's have a talk about this for a second because Sons of Anarchy has put through a lot of interesting villains. And I think head and shoulders above them is Clay because Clay's got the internal club connection versus some of
yeah,
these external forces like Damon Pope, for example.
yeah,
Damon Pope is just a bad guy through and through,
right.
but his introduction is like far into the show. Like him and like August or Augustus Mark or
Mhm.
whatever his like right hand
But you
man
knew
was.
those guys were going to die at the end. Where Clay, you kind of knew Clay was just going to continue to wreak havoc. Do
I
so.
I hated the way his storyline ended. Like I really did. It felt so anticlimactic and it just pissed me off. It's like this is not the way that you but then again also so many of the characters in Sons of Anarchy got endings that none of them deserved
Yeah.
because
I always thought Clay should have been the one in the place of Opie. It made more sense to me for Clay to be in that spot than Opie, but
that's not
I'm
what they
not a
decided.
Hollywood writer, so
That's not what they decided to do.
right. So
Another person potentially to bring up that's at least worth mentioning, Gemma.
yeah. And Gemma was in my thoughts as well. Did I want to go with Clay? Did I want to go with Gemma?
Yeah.
You know, I kind of weighed it like this, and then I was like, well, Clay had more culpability because he was one of the originals, and he really put a lot more shit in motion than what Gemma did.
Oh
Gemma
yeah,
was
for
just
sure.
Gemma.
Gemma was just
So,
Gemma. That is the perfect way
like
to put that.
like you expect it from a female. You don't expect it from somebody who is your brother in arms, who's the guy that, bikers have a special code. So that code is never supposed to be broken. So for a female to do it, you kind of expect it because females come and go, even in that culture, mothers, sisters, all of that. They're sort of disposable and interchangeable because they're women and they're supposed to be in the back. You never expect it from the guys that are elbow to elbow with you.
Hmm.
So for one of them to betray you, is much more harsh than to have your sister betray you or your mother betray you because a lot of these guys, let's face it, they're not bikers because they come from good families,
Right. Right.
you know? So to say, oh, my mother's a bitch and betrayed me, that's the story of 95% of the people that are in these clubs.
Mhm.
Okay. Their mothers were alcoholics, prostitutes, drug addicts, or some other form of bottom feeding life. Guys that are in the clubs with you, though, that you're riding next to, those are supposed to be the guys you can count on no matter what. So to have one of them do what Clay did is really, again, sort of like spitting on someone. It's really the ultimate
Right.
screw you
Right.
to a legacy.
Mhm.
So, you know, I put Clay way above Gemma, and I almost went with the other dude, but you know, Clay was really the one that, he was the one that he was part of the club. So his betrayal really was the worst of the worst for
Yeah.
me. So
M-
number 11 for you.
My number 11, this is my last comic book one. It's Homelander from The Boys. And Homelander is pretty much just turned into a superhero version of Donald Trump. And like, okay, like I see what you're trying to do with this. A bit on the nose, but hey, it is what it is with this. And my problem with Homelander is like, dear Lord, how the fuck do you stop something like this? Because like Homelander is pretty much Superman, and it's like, oh, what if, hey, what if we take Superman and made him an asshole? Like, okay, like that's fine because there's plenty of superheroes out there who are all powerful but who are assholes. Wait a second, what if you made him a sociopath? Like, oh,
Right.
now we're really getting somewhere. Okay, cool. And the problem that we have with Homelander is like who on earth is going to stop Homelander because the guy has
Yeah.
all the powers for Superman, and that's kind of my big concern with the boys in general. It's like how on earth are you going to stop Homelander? And the answer is you're probably not going to. So I don't know how you plan on doing this, or if this is a situation where, oh shit, Homelander, he sold his soul and, we got to destroy his Horcruxes or whatever the fuck. And
Right,
like I just don't know how you solve this
right,
problem. And this is kind of where I transition and be like, this is kind of the problem with a lot of superhero villains. It's like, well, some of these people are so powerful. It's like, how are you planning on stopping them? With the power of teamwork? Yeah, bullshit. Okay, that's fine. So we'll see how this pans out. But I picked Homelander because Anthony Starr just plays him to perfection. He's so good in the role, and he's becoming more and more unhinged. And I don't know, it just feels very timely, even though it is a bit too on the nose at times. But Anthony Starr is just great as Homelander.
So, the funniest thing about that, I started to watch season one. I never finished it. I got interrupted and never went back to it. I only about a week ago realized that he is the same person who was in the TV show Banshee. And
Mhm.
I fucking love Banshee. The hair color change and everything
It looks very
threw me
different.
off.
Yeah,
When I saw that, I was like, wait, what?
yeah.
That's not. And then I looked and it was like, holy shit, it is. Like, I love Banshee. Banshee is one of those TV shows, sort of came out of nowhere, but it was just such a great show, had such great characters. I love that they had the Amish element in it. Like that was such a cool
Mhm.
sort of twist of, you have the skinheads and the Amish. I was like, well, that
Ooh,
was that was kind of out of nowhere.
that's an interesting combination.
Right. So I didn't realize that Homelander was the dude from Thing. So I'm definitely going to go back to it now because now that I know that, I'm going to be like, okay, I'll look at it in a different way. I'm not a huge comic book or comic type thing. I do watch them on occasion, depending on what it is. I'm still waiting for bated breath for them to do something with Lobo. I know that's virtually impossible, but we'll discuss that at a further time because that's another whole hour I could go into with Lobo. But Lobo is my favorite. I relate to Lobo. Like I said, I don't like being the asshole, but I'm really good at it. So
Right.
I have a lot of Lobo in me.
Nice. All right. Who's your number 10? Let's get into our top 10.
My number 10, probably somebody that a lot of people are going to have way higher, but I'm at number 10, Gus Fring from Breaking Bad.
You're right. I do have him higher on my list.
Giancarlo Esposito. So, that's my number 10. And I probably could have put him a couple higher, but the two shows where I would have put him originally, I think I watched them more and I like them more than I
Uh-huh.
actually like Breaking Bad. So, but great character. Giancarlo was somebody that I didn't know a lot about before Breaking Bad. I've watched a lot of his older stuff and his other stuff now, and I have a real appreciation for
Mhm.
him now.
Yeah.
The diversity that he has.
Yeah.
So,
No, for sure.
and
Um,
he's a part of the other series for Vincent D'Onofrio that I debated between that one and this one. So,
the
you know,
Gus Fring, Gus Fring is a bit of an interesting character put on this because if you look at Gus Fring's kind of villain archetype, for
right?
example, he's not like a lot of the other villains because
Yeah,
he's like a community man. He leads this double life, and he only has like a couple like really violent moments where you're like, oh shit, like this guy is not to be fucked with, like
right.
plain and simple. But those moments, they just stick out in your brain so much. It's
He's
like,
he's cerebral as opposed to physical.
yeah, yeah. So he's another one also where just his influence that he has on other people, he's not the one that's doing a lot of the evil doing. He is getting other people to do it for him. And that's just a type of power and villainy that I just almost scares me a little bit more sometimes.
Right.
So,
No, it is. George Carlin said it best when he did the comedy routine about, you know, they always say that it's the quiet ones you gotta look out for. Meanwhile, the motherfucker at the end of the bar beating his bar with a machete saying, I'm gonna kill everyone in the room. So it's sort of that type of analogy almost of people say, the quiet ones are what you gotta watch, but
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the complete opposite. Like sometimes they're just going to let you know that they're violent and there's not a lot of finesse about it. Like, hey, I'm here, I'm just going to kill everyone and we'll sort it out later.
Yeah.
Lobo, for example. But yeah, Gus is my number 10 because, you know,
Well,
played really well.
yeah.
So,
Oh yeah, he's great. And granted, when you meet him and when they connect him and did you ever watch Better Call Saul? Yeah. When they connected him, it felt it's like, oh, I'm glad to see this character again because he's just so memorable from Breaking Bad,
right.
but also it's like, how much can I really get invested in him? Because you know what's gonna happen at the end. That's the problem I have with all of these prequel series. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you expect me to relate and to just enjoy the ride when I know what's going to happen to some of these people
Right.
down the road? So, my number 10, my number 10 is Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons.
Okay.
And look, Mr. Burns has done a lot of really shitty things on The Simpsons. In the first 10 seasons in particular, he does a lot of really shitty things. Uh, he he steals sunlight, he steals oil, he like kidnaps a bunch of dogs to make them
Right.
into a greyhound fur coat. You know, he is as cartoony of a villain as you can get on The Simpsons. But again, with him, it's the longevity. It is the I'm so rich that I have, you know, I can do literally whatever I want, and no harm can come to me unless he's shot by Maggie Simpson. So overall, I had to put Montgomery Burns on the list. He was originally like higher on my list, and then I snapped out of it and was like, "What the fuck am I thinking? I can't have Mr. Burns much higher than like he's
Right.
got to be at least in double digits compared to some of these other people because he is a cartoon villain through and through.
Right.
I could have put Hank Scorpio on this list, and that would have been more of a villain than what Mr. Burns is in the show. But overall, just the longevity that Mr. Burns has had, because The Simpsons has been on. The Simpsons is an institution now.
And Simpsons is like what, season 28, season
Oh no,
29?
they're in like season like mid 30s now,
Oh, are they?
and
Okay.
and
I lost track a long time ago. I remember their debut being part of the Lisa Allman show. So, I mean, if it gives you an idea of how old I am.
right.
I
So
was there at the beginning. I remember when The Simpsons were, they weren't actual cartoons. They were like little 20-second shorts in between,
Mhm.
you know. They were random thoughts in Lisa Allman's head. So,
Right. So I had to put Mr. Burns on the list simply because hey, if you try to steal a teddy bear from a child, that makes you a pretty shitty
right.
person. So so yeah, that's that's my number 10. What's your number 9?
Kind of going back again. I have Murdoch from the original MacGyver,
Mm.
Michael DeBarris. Just a really diabolical bad guy who, doesn't really ever succeed, but never gives up. And
That's
and
80s. That's an 80s supervillain
yeah.
through and through on
So
television.
I
Not
will
very
say when they rebooted all of the series, at first it was Hawaii Five-O, and then it was the MacGyver, and then it was Magnum. I was very skeptical. Like these are three. First it was Hawaii Five-O, and I was like, that's a really classic show. Should we be messing with that? And then it came out, and it was really good. Like Peter Ledov did a brilliant job recasting that, right? And then he did I'm going to do MacGyver. And then I was like, oh, you can't mess with MacGyver, man, because, well, then he just started twisting the shit all around of, fucking Peter Thornton became Patricia Thornton and she was a double agent right from the first thing. And then he brought in Maddie, who was like the midget character. And she had the hacker Riley, who was fucking beautiful and thing. And, the kid who was playing MacGyver was a really great choice. But when they introduced Murdoch, I was like, what are they going to do with Murdoch? Because you knew at some point Murdoch was going to show up. And when he does, it's a different Murdoch, but it's really not a different Murdoch. It's still the same diabolical, twisted asshole, but now he's sort of snarky. Now he's
Mhm.
sort of, the genius type, where the other one was just diabolical. But I'm an old school guy, and Murdoch is one of those characters during that time period when you had the A Team and Knight Rider and MacGyver and Airwolf. He was sort of a constant for a lot of seasons of, you know, Wasn't a constant every single episode. It was like, every 5, 6, 8 episodes, Murdoch was going to show up or be behind some plot that was trying to get MacGyver. So, just and Michael he's such a great actor. Another actor who never got credit for some of the roles he played in movies, and a phenomenal musician as well.
Hmm.
Really great singer and guitar player. So, yeah, Murdoch from the original MacGyver is my number 9.
I love the original MacGyver. I love it
Yeah,
so much. That was a show that, you know, at first I was like, it's a guilty pleasure. And then looking back, it's like, no, I just straight up like MacGyver. It's not even
yeah,
a guilty pleasure. So I haven't seen the reboot. I haven't brought myself like I've heard good things about the reboot,
it's good.
but
It's worth it.
I get what you're saying, but I can't. My
I thought the same thing. I really did. Like I didn't want to like it, and I just was like, I can't help but like it. I love Riley. I love the modern twist they put on it. I like the new version of Mac where, he still had the same principles, but he kind of did it in a different way. And then the third, when they did Magnum, man. And then, okay, Magnum is going to be played by Jay Hernandez. And I was like,
that's a
they're making,
choice.
I was like, they're making Magnum a Mexican dude. I was like, ooh, that's a bold choice. Like, because Tom Selleck is Tom Selleck. He's still beloved. And I knew that, oh, people aren't gonna like that. But man, he did that series. He kept a helicopter, he kept a estate, he kept a Ferrari, he kept a Tiger's hat. And Jay absolutely fucking slays it as Magnum. Now, the fact that they turned Higgins into a female SAS agent, so she's a badass
Mhm.
James Bond type, that was a brilliant move as well.
Mhm.
Still got the Dobermans, Zeus and Apollo. So everything, the nostalgia factor, off the scale for the show, but just a completely new twist,
Take.
just like they did with Hawaii Five-O. And I ended up liking that one the most of all because the interplay of the characters, it was so well done. And I just was like, you know what? I didn't want to like any of the 3 shows, and I love all of them. I watched them multiple times. I'll be laying in bed and a rerun will come on, like Little House on the Prairie or Hawaii Five-O, the
Mhm.
new shows, and I watch it because it's really, really well done. Like I would love to see him do a modern version of the A-Team.
Oh, that
I
would
think
be
fucking brilliant with it. So that's like number 1 on my list. If I could do a TV reboot, it'd be Peter Lenov, and I would have him do the A-Team. I
mm,
just think it's the time.
it's the time. Very nice.
So
Let's
you're
okay.
number 9.
My number 9, I have Vecna from Stranger Things. And
Okay.
Stranger Things is kind of an interesting show because if you if I look at my list, I have my superhero or my supervillains, and then I have one supernatural character. And I think like that to me, I kind of thought about it in my head. It's like, am I just not buying supernatural characters as as something that can be a villain on the same scale as some of these other ones? And I think I came to the answer, yeah, probably. So, but what Vecna does in one season of Stranger Things is already more brutal than a lot of the other characters or a lot of the other villains and monsters that come up in Stranger Things. I'm very and the only one that's going to like kind of have a little bit of more longevity. I guess the Demogorgon does have a little bit of longevity as well. No, who am I kidding? They all
Never
have a
watched
little bit.
Stranger Things, so I don't know the characters well. I do know. I mean, I know the characters. I don't know the story of
Yeah,
like what happens where.
yeah,
But I've heard my sons watched it. Well, all of my sons have watched it, so they talk about it. So I
yeah.
know like little bits and pieces, but I've never actually sat
Mhm.
and watched it yet. It's on my list of
I'll get to it
other
eventually.
300, but I'm a creature of habit. Like I try to start a new series, but then I'll be like, this episode of MacGyver will come on. I don't remember that episode. I got to go back and watch MacGyver. So I'll start like the 9 seasons of MacGyver. I saw an episode of Married with Children. Didn't remember the episode. How the fuck did I miss that? So I had to watch the 9 seasons of Married with Children. So I'm constantly going back and watching old shit just because I'll see a random ass video or something and not remember it. So
No,
it's fine.
I
I
got
did.
I got you with that. It's all good because Vecna is one character also that the makeup design and the creature design is just
Hmm.
eerie looking. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, it's just the practical effects are really great, and the guy that they got to play him is just oh just God, great casting choice with
I
that.
look
So
forward to seeing it though. Again, as the nostalgia dude, I'm gonna love the throwback
oh
that it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
I'm gonna love hearing the music and the different things of, it's gonna be like, oh man, I remember that. I remember when I got that. I remember reading that. I remember that couch. And grandma had that couch.
Hmm.
It's always like that in the old shows when they do the throwback thing. It's like, God, I remember my Aunt Nancy having that coffee table. So
Right, right. Yeah, there'll be a couple moments in there. It's like, holy shit, yeah, that's pretty
yeah,
cool.
I'm sure.
Um,
I'm sure there will.
there is there's one part in particular that involves Metallica's Master of Puppets
Yeah,
that is
I know that.
pretty
I
gnarly.
see. That's the one part of the show I do know because my son was like, you know, hey, Dad, they use Metallica, blah 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 blah, and I was like, yeah, it would have been. So the show is based in 1980,
Mhm.
1986. And
Yep.
how do you know it's 1986? Because that's when Master of Puppets came out and when it was popular. So if it's not 1986, they fucked up.
Yeah, yeah.
But
What's
that
your
kid's a
number
good.
8?
Number 8, I have Jip Rossetti from Boardwalk Empire, Bobby Cannavale.
I've never seen Boardwalk Empires, and I don't have a good reason for not watching it, if I'm being
It's
perfectly honest.
it's really one of them shows that I don't know why I started watching it. Steve Buscemi mostly was sort of my reasoning behind it. I figured I don't know if I'll like it, but he was in it. William Macy was in it for a little bit. So I figured between those two, I would probably at least have a mild interest in it. And it has a sort of has this Al Capone type of vibe to it. And I like a good heavy so Jip Rossetti is a character who he's a businessman, he's a gangster, but he's mostly unhinged the majority of the fucking time, and you really don't know what he's going to do from one minute to the next. And he's pretty violent, dude. When you cross him or he doesn't get his way, very much in the style of Kingpin. He's sort of a bull in a china shop. So yeah, that's my number 8 of Jip Rossetti.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that character. So there was a period where I didn't like we didn't have HBO, so I
Mhm.
didn't watch a lot of those HBO shows in the like in the 2000s. Like apparently when HBO was just absolutely crushing it with shows, there's a couple shows that I went back to and watched, and a couple of them will show up on my list
Yeah,
eventually. But
I've got a number of HBO shows on my list. I'm a sort of an HBO fanatic when it comes to a good series. So
yeah, we will get into more HBO shows a little bit later on my list, but my number eight's Hannibal Lecter from the show Hannibal. And this one feels like a cheat as well because yeah, the guy who's a serial killer who also eats people, yeah, no shit, he's going to be a top villain. But I was very concerned when they cast Mads Mikkelsen. I don't know why. I just was like, I don't see it. I don't buy it. And also because when I think Hannibal Lecter, I think Anthony Hopkins
right,
and just the unsettling guy who
right.
won an Oscar for 17 goddamn minutes of screen time and that's it. Uh, but Mads Mikkelsen just he puts his own spin on Hannibal Lecter and he does a fantastic job with it. I'm also not one who loves horror as well because shocker, I don't like to be scared. Some people do. I fucking don't. So, and I wouldn't consider this like a straight horror series, but it's horror adjacent and because you mix that with just like some of the like fucked up disturbing imagery that's in the show and his weird obsession with William, it's just like oh like I'm uncomfortable watching this, but it's also so goddamn good I can't help but think that Mads Mikkelsen did a great job.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah, so that's my number 8. On to our number 7.
So number 7 is where I have Wilson Fisk, which
Mhm.
is Kingpin from Daredevil. I love the portrayal that Vincent does of it. I debated between his portrayal of Kingpin and his portrayal of Paul Giagante in Godfather of Harlem. Brilliant freaking show. Him and Forrest Whitaker, man, just they trade back and forth in that show, and a little bit more of a heavyweight in. I mean, he's still the badass in Godfather of Harlem, but he's an Italian gangster, and it's not really a stretch for somebody like him. Whereas Kingpin takes a little more finesse, because he is 1 minute really brilliant or really super violent, and then he's the smart, super rich guy. So it takes a little more finesse to play Kingpin than it does to play drug dealing Italian mob guy. So yeah, I have Kingpin at number 7, or Wilson Fisk, whatever you want to call him, refer to him as.
Either
Um,
way, it's the
yeah,
correct answer. Yeah, that's good call on that. Not very many overlaps so far, which that's something that I'm
I have a feeling we're gonna have at least 2 more.
I'm sure we probably will. My number 7. This is a show I lost a lot of steam of towards the end when it got super weird, but I cannot deny that the first couple seasons of Lost were just appointment television. So my number 7 is Ben Linus from Lost. And for for a character like him to with not a whole lot of supernatural, or like he's not overly strong. He's not, you know, he's ruthless in a different way, but just Ben Linus is just a master manipulator. He is a narcissist through and through. Just he just makes me uncomfortable as a character. And the guy who plays him just does it to perfection. He plays a very similar character in a lot of TV shows, most recently like with Fallout. But yeah, Ben Linus is just a character through and through that I was like, God, I hate you in Lost. And that's saying a lot considering by the end of the show, it's like, God, I fucking hate all of you. You're all pretty shit characters, with the exception of a handful of others. But yep. So my number 7 is Ben Linus from Lost. Your number 6.
My number 6 is one that I'm almost positive we're going to have in common. You'll probably have him higher, but for number 6, I have Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones.
Not that much higher than you,
Uh,
because
and Rowan, however you say it.
Rowan, however the fuck, yeah, how, yeah, that's the
Ian
perfect way to
from
say his name, Rian,
so,
whatever.
and
Yeah,
it's from Game of Thrones. For those of you that have not, you want to be that guy. Like, oh, I've never seen Game of Thrones. Yeah, well, fuck you.
right.
I have. So yeah, I have Ramsay. I chose Ramsay because when you're choosing between Cersei, Joffrey, and Ramsay, Joffrey was young and impetulant and was influenced by Cersei.
Yep.
So he was he was sort of a bad guy by just design of his mother. And Cersei, she was manipulative. She was the bad guy, but Bolton was the one that like Ramsay just had a mean streak. Like Ramsay was the serial killer type. Like he was sadistic.
Yeah.
So he was the one of all the bad guys, more than Baelish, more than Joffrey, more than Cersei, more than all the other characters. Ramsay was the one that really stood out as the one that was just the true bad, bad, bad one.
Yeah. Because that's the grand debate, right? Who's the worst villain? Like who's the worst piece of shit in Game of Thrones? Is it Cersei? Is it Joffrey? Is it Ramsay? And
Mhm.
the if we're in court, the evidence that I'm presenting for Ramsay Bolton is I present to you Theon Greyjoy. Oh wait, you destroyed Theon Greyjoy to the point where as a character, he just a shell of himself and just
Right.
awful what happens to him. Granted, Theon, shit character at the beginning, a shit person for the most part, but nobody deserved what Ramsay did to Theon. I
Right.
present to you Rickon Stark, or the young Stark that he, Battle of the Bastards, he makes, run across the field and then shoots him with an arrow right in front of Jon Snow. That's a shit thing to do.
Mhm.
I present to you Roose Bolton, who, dude, this guy like gave you his name. You were a bastard. That's all you were. So that and finally, I present to you Sansa Stark. That was rough to watch. So yeah, those four things alone, not to mention like all the other shit things that he did as
So
well.
which one was it? I can't remember because it's been so long since I saw it. Which one was it he fed to the dogs? Or was that just a random character that he fed to the dogs?
I'm sure I'm kind of in the same position as you. I don't remember which character it is, but I feel like it was a character that was somewhat of significance. So, but yeah, just a shit guy through and through.
Right.
He's a couple spots up from where I'm at.
No, I figured he would be on your list. Just, it was a series that I enjoyed, but I wasn't like obsessed with. So it was kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
great series, shitty ending, a little bit long-winded in places, but
Yep. No, I got you there. So my number six is Gus Fring from that. Gus Fring was originally a little bit higher on my list, but I don't know. I think the part of it that kind of I think Gus Fring from like a violence perspective gets knocked down a little bit because he's not violent all the time compared to some of these other people that I have on my list. But yeah, that Gus Fring, we've said enough
yeah,
about him and Giancarlo Esposito or Esposito or however he pronounces it.
Giancarlo.
Yeah, is great. So all right, we're on to our top five. Who is your number five?
So my number five is one that, again, much like Boardwalk Empire, I sort of wandered into just cluelessly, not really knowing what it was about. My son said, "You gotta watch it." So I started watching it and immediately was like, "Ooh." The number five is Black Jack Randall from Outlander. Tobias Menzies, a real sadistic, got the sexual assault angle that comes in. You got the, raping the dude's wife in front of him while he's chained up in a dungeon is really a fucked up scene. So has a Highlander sort of element
Mhm.
to it, but also, one of them things where it's a lot of flashbacks back and forth, but really great series so far. And I got to watch more of it, but
Yeah,
he is definitely a heavyweight bad guy. He is a character who makes you hate him in every sense of the word. Like he just zero redeeming qualities. Like, you know, there's nothing you could do to redeem this dude. Like he could save a busload of fucking nuns and it's not gonna redeem him in any sense of the word. So
right.
that's my number five.
I've actually never seen Outlander, and it's because look, if Outlander was on a different channel, not on Stars, I think it would have been a
Right.
lot more popular. But now that it's on Netflix, I think the popularity is expanded with it. My wife watches the show. She says you got to watch the show, and we're like, yes, I know. You are not the only one that has said that I got to watch this show, but
Yeah.
it's
Eventually.
eventually, yeah. So my number five, The Sopranos is filled with a lot of bad people. So it's kind of hard to figure out who I would put on this list from The Sopranos. And much to my surprise, it's like, am I really gonna put fucking Tony Soprano's mom on this list? Yeah, I ended up doing that. So I she's my number five. And I was like, I cannot believe this. Like, how the fuck am I gonna put Tony Soprano's mom on this list versus some of the other characters in in The Sopranos, filled with just lots of deplorable people. I was like, well, if I'm looking at some of the things that she does as a parent and just as like a person as well, I can't help but just have, the violence angle is one thing, but just like the constant gaslighting and, just nothing's ever going to be good enough. And yeah, just very unexpected of me to be like, oh, not only am I going to put like the non-violent person from The Sopranos, but also you're going to be pretty fucking high on my list. Like, huh, didn't see that coming. So cool. I'll take that.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Your number four.
So the top four, these are the heavyweights. These are the four characters that to me are the four most memorable baddies in television kingdom. Number four, we're going back to HBO from the TV show Oz. J.K. Simmons as Vern Schillinger. You know, I had a discussion recently about J.K. Simmons, and someone made the remark, well, J.K. can't really play a great villain. And I was like,
Yes, you can.
tell me you have
Yes.
not seen Oz without telling me you have not seen Oz, because that is a
That
portrayal you will never make that dumbass comment again,
you
because
will. So
it's
yes,
nasty in every
yeah,
sense of the word. You
like
know, like
neo-Nazi,
evil, manipulative.
neo-Nazi who
Yeah,
just preys and tortures on Beecher.
kills his own children.
Yeah,
You know,
it's.
and so I mean, you don't get much worse than killing your own children. Like, you know,
I also have Schillinger on my list a little bit higher up.
okay,
Because yeah, I agree with
respect.
all of that. Oz was a show that I like. Again, you could credit, like, I don't think Oz gets enough credit for what it
Oh
did for
no,
HBO, because Oz had the unfortunate. Oz was the show that went first, that
yeah,
like put HBO. It's like, oh, you're making shit that is like completely different from what's on TV now. And I remember watching that first episode and being like, oh shit, this is not like a lot of other shows on television.
no.
So, yes, the show is just filled with like all these like stereotypes and everything like that, but
So
all
is prison.
yeah. So, but all of all of the characters in this, like just the sheer amount of people that they just have come in and out of this prison in just this special cell block called the Emerald City, which is a fantastic
Right.
name for a experimental cell block. But just you could pick a lot of pretty bad people from Oz, because
Yeah.
I mean, shit, you're in a prison. So, and
That
you
and that
have,
was the thing. That
yeah.
was the thing. Like, there were three separate characters from Oz. I was like, do I want Schillinger? Do I want Adebisi? Or do I want, And it was like, because Adebisi was a real motherfucker too. So was like, but I just, to me, like, the portrayal of the neo-Nazi, that just put it over the top. Like, it was
Well,
such a.
and in a show that isn't a, it's a show that proved from the very beginning, from that first episode, they are not afraid to kill characters off.
Right,
Not afraid. For Vern Schillinger to be pretty much in the almost the entire series,
right,
like, yeah, that's the terrifying thing about Schillinger, is that he was just there throughout the whole course of the whole show. And
right.
just when you think that there was going to be some redemption there, no. That like
I,
he takes one step forward and then takes like 30 steps back. Like
yeah.
it's yeah. So my number 4 is Ramsey Bolton, for all the things that we talked about. So who's your number 3?
My number three, which again, one you'll probably have, is the Trinity Killer, Arthur Mitchell from Dexter. Absolutely love John Lithgow. Just to me, one of the greatest portrayals of a serial killer. Like, if you watch Criminal Minds, if you watch NCIS, if you watch any show where they deal with serial killers and take in the information they say, like, he's just the walking text case of the worst kind of serial killer. So, and like I said, I love John Lithgow. I think he's just a really perfect person to play that role. Like, he's so, you can't help but love John Lithgow, man. Like, just no matter what he plays in, he just fucking kills. He's like Anthony Hopkins. Doesn't matter what you hand him, he's gonna, he'll take the biggest piece of shit and make it worth watching. So, yeah, my number three is Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer from Dexter.
CJ, my number 3 is also the Trinity Killer from Dexter.
Nice.
And you know what's weird about this? CJ, I've never seen an episode of Dexter. I haven't. But the thing is that I've seen clips, and I also, unfortunately, because the internet isn't afraid of spoiling things, I know the ramifications of what Dexter coming toe to toe with the Trinity Killer, ultimately, what the ultimate end result is. And for that to be the end result, whew, That's rough. And John Lithgow just he's got so much range in just some
Yeah.
of the things that he can do with that character. It's terrifying. And I think of all the people that Dexter went toe to toe with, and how do I know since I've never really watched the show. I need to go back and watch it. He was different
Yeah.
compared to some of the other ones. So
He's definitely the heavyweight champion of the people Dexter has gone up against. Like he's definitely the one that
yeah.
was the one. So
Who's your number two?
you got to do your number. Oh, you have Trinity Killer too, don't you? I'm sort of keeping a running list over here.
Okay.
My number two, again going back to the old days, but a character that probably the greatest cliffhanger in all of TV history. A character that nobody liked, everyone hated by design. He was supposed to hate this character, and he fucking killed it in making you hate him. It was Jerry Ewing from Dallas,
Yeah.
and it was one of them TV shows where I only watched it because my grandmother watched it. It was basically a soap opera,
Mhm.
but again, a character that just he had no redeeming qualities. Like he was your consummate capitalist pig piece of shit who would step on, he'd step on the Easter bunny for a few dollars, So that cliffhanger just hung like who shot JR, and they fucking newspaper articles and TV commercials, and they played that shit out over the whole summer of who shot JR, and it was really one of the greatest moments in TV when they
Mhm.
finally got around to it. But, yeah, just a real asshole, so that's my
Did
number two.
did you like the reboot of Dallas?
I didn't actually see it. I
Yeah.
didn't watch it because I didn't honestly really like the first one. But again, it was an era where there was no cable. There was no sort of
Streaming
watch.
service. Yeah, you
Yeah,
you watched what was in front of
you watched what you were forced to watch.
you.
For example, like I said on the last episode, the number one rule in our house, my grandfather's house, if Andy Griffith or Michael Landon was in the show and it was on, that's what you were watching. And Grandma's was Dallas. So after you watched Andy Griffith's show, after you watched Little House on the Prairie, after you watched Matlock, after you watched Highway to Heaven, and Dallas, then you got to watch
Whatever you wanted at
Badgers
that point.
or whatever else was left. So I watched Dallas just because it was on, and I lived 9 miles out into the country. It wasn't like I could walk down to the corner store or go to a football game or anything to get away from it. We lived on a 400-acre farm 9 miles into the country. So your choice was to watch it or go to bed. And
Right.
who wants to go to bed at fucking 9 o'clock on a Friday night?
Exactly. No,
So,
I got you there. My number two is Vern Schillinger for all the things that we talked about. So I guess
nice.
that leaves our number one. So CJ, who is your number one TV villain of
So this is a person who some are going to consider him an anti-hero as opposed to a villain. This is a gentleman who I think is probably the greatest actor on earth right now. But my favorite TV villain, I think the best example of a real villain because of all of the shit he did. He had all of the elements of all of these other characters. My number one is Boyd Crowder from Justified. Boyd was Boyd, man. Like 1 minute he was killing people, 1 minute he was, helping Raylan, and then 1 minute just he was so unpredictable. Like 1 minute to the next, you never knew what Boyd was gonna do, what underhanded shit, and his lines were just, like Walton Goggins is a fucking national treasure. Like that
Mhm.
guy, he's getting better and better, but Boyd is just a character that I don't think you could ever recreate Boyd. You know, I don't think if you were to reboot that show and try to have someone else play Boyd, I don't think it's going to be 1/100th as good because, it's Walton's delivery. He took a character that was supposed to be in 3 minutes of the
Mhm.
first episode and turned it into 7 seasons. And
A fixture of the show.
he took a character that was supposed to be in 2 minutes and literally became the co-star of the fucking series.
Mhm.
And yeah, again, the lines, the shit that he says, the way he delivered his lines, with that half bad guy, he had the Appalachian drawl, but there was that hint of superiority and education that he had, like he was the educated redneck. The scene where I can't think of his name, the other main bad guy comes in and he says something to Boyd, and Boyd's eating a cheeseburger, and he kind of turns and looks at him like, "You're getting on my nerves." And Boyd answers him back, and he says to Boyd, he's like, "I don't think I understand exactly what you're implying." And Boyd sits his burger down and he spins around in his chair. He goes, I've been accused of being a lot of goddamn things in my life, but inarticulate is not one of them. And it was the way he delivers the line with that first part stressing the hillbilly, you know, goddamn. But then he's like, inarticulate is not one of them. And it was such a perfect casting for that role, man. Just all throughout it, him and Raylan going back and forth. And, you know, I love that they didn't kill him because it really would have been sort of anticlimactic for him to die. It would have been too easy of an ending.
Yeah.
Like Boyd had to go to prison. Boyd had to sort of linger in your mind like,
yeah,
this is a guy who can come back at some point. This is a guy who's going to haunt Raylan long into the future. So I love that they left that ending the way it was. But yeah, Walton will always be my number one until something better comes along.
yeah.
Boyd is the consummate bad guy to me. So that is my number one. Boyd
Justif-
Crowder, Justified.
Justified, another show on the list that I just have not gotten to yet
Oh my God.
because FX is kind of on that HBO trajectory because
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that they've got coming out is just so good right now. So, and FX has had actually like a long track record of putting out great television. So, Justified, another like Justified, The Shield, Sons of Anarchy. Like Sons of Anarchy was the show that I watched of that, and just yeah, I need to get around to Justified. So,
So what do all three of those shows have in common?
what?
Walt Goggins literally was a star in all of them. He played the crooked detective in The Shield. He was Venus
Van Dam, yeah,
in Sons of Anarchy, and he was Boyd Crowder. So
yeah.
again, Walton Goggins out of this world, man. Like,
Well, and then Walton Goggins
and then
also
Fallout.
he's great in Fallout. He's one of my favorite parts of the Righteous Gemstones as well.
Yes.
As baby Billy,
Yeah.
baby Billy Bible Bucks.
Who wants to suck an old man's dick?
Yeah, so
it was like what that line came out of nowhere, and that's why it was so perfect. It was such a Danny McBride thing to do. Like he comes out, he's all happy, he's just like, and he has that smirk on his face, and like, who wants to suck an old man's dick?
yeah.
And it was like, oh fuck, was like, but again, a character that only Walton could really put his own unique twist on. Fallout is another one. Like I've never played the games. I know the lore and all of that, but just takes a role, just kills it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen him in anything. Ant-Man and the Wasp, he was awesome. He's the Unicorn, he was awesome. He was awesome in The Hateful Eight. He was awesome in, I mean, just
anything that he's in, Walton Goggins does great stuff. So yeah. So that leaves my number one. And my number one, it is not my favorite show of all time, but I do consider it one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And The Wire has so many characters that you could pick as the top villain of the show. Because you have Avon, who was the original person that you're like, oh, Avon Barksdale he's a bad guy, but he kind of operates a little bit more in the shadows. Then you have the guy that's kind of the lieutenant that is kind of a little bit more up front. You got Stringer Bell, who that is the first like that as Stringer Bell was the first time that I was introduced to Idris Elba and was like, this guy's legit.
Right.
But where I ultimately landed was my number one is Marlowe for that because Stringer Bell and Avon walked so that Marlowe could murder everything around him. and just the sadistic nature and just, hey, I'm gonna just take what you guys built and just amp it up to 11, and just everybody was terrified of him. So yeah, like just from a sheer brutality standpoint, is
Right.
he as strong of a character as Stringer Bell or Avon was? No, absolutely not. But he makes his presence known in just so much many more violent ways, and just kind of epitomizes just everything that like you just can't stand about Baltimore in The Wire. So yeah, I wasn't
I
sure
can't.
which Wire character I was going to pick, but I knew it was going to be
Yeah.
pretty close to being in like my top 5 minimum. I like after thinking about it for a while, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with putting him number 1 on my list.
You know what? I can't really disagree. I love The Wire. Again, one of my probably top 6 or 7 all-time favorites as far as, TV series. So much to work with. Again, you can go Stringer, you can go Marlowe, you can go that. You can go with Chris, who worked for Marlowe, who did all the killing. Or if you really want to kind of lean that way, almost go with Omar.
Yep.
Because, I know Omar was supposed to be sort of the lovable bad guy,
He's still a
but
bad guy.
he's
So,
still the dude that was robbing and just doing things. Like everyone was scared of Omar. It was like the legend of Omar. And the fact that the way again that Michael played Omar was very much in a style that like Boyd or Walton played Boyd. He turned that character on its head and just made it his own. The way he would walk down the street, dragging the gun barrel on the street, whistling. I mean, it just really added a whole new dimension
yeah,
to
I almost picked Omar
right,
just for the line, "You come for the king, you best not miss." That
right,
that I was reading a news article recently where they said that, and I was like, seriously? Like you said this in like a non-quoting way. You incorporated it into the story. It's like that is iconic levels of villainry right there, but kind of the same thing. It's like Omar is like he's kind of an anti-hero in a
yeah.
lot of ways, but if you really think about it, it's like, yeah, he's still a shit guy though. So, but yeah, the Marlowe was just the one character that I was like, oh, this
Yeah,
guy is different, and that's what I ultimately landed on. So,
I can't really hate on that
yeah,
at all. Like I totally understand it, get it, and that's a pick that's a great pick. I mean, great character for
yeah.
that. So
Well, thank you. And yeah, so that's our list. So if we missed
beautiful.
anyone, if we missed anyone as a
Yeah,
villain, let us know. Like we talked about, these lists are kind of at the mercy of what we've seen, what we've watched, and such. And
right.
as pop culture stewards, just whoever catches our attention. So, um,
Yeah.
but CJ, greatly appreciate the idea to talk about TV villains, and looking forward to jumping on the loud list coming up soon. So,
Yes.
CJ, do you have anything else that you want to plug, and where can people find you?
So this is basically when the loud list comes up. We recorded the first episode. I got another episode. I think next Friday we're going to record episode 2. We're going to have this guy in on here real soon. That'll be probably episode 3 or 4, depending on if he gets in before the other person I have as well to make an appointment with. But that'll be the first month or so. Really crazy ideas. Anything that your brain can wrap around for a list. I am open to doing this. You want to make a list of the top 10 AC/DC songs. You want to make a list of the top 10 Nicolas Cage roles or movies. I got a massive list. Just message me. I will send you the list. Or, 10 reasons why cheesecake is the best dessert. Cool. I mean, I'm open to really any random crazy idea that you guys can come up with. The point of the show, the idea of the show is have fun, think outside the box, laugh. We're going to have some topics that are more serious. We're going to have some that are just completely stupid and silly. You
Mhm.
know, the 10 worst, the 10 worst candies you could give a trick-or-treater, or the 10 worst gifts you've ever received for Christmas, the 10 worst alcohols. Now that's going to turn into, depending on how you want to interpret it, it could be like the 10 that are the worst tasting, or you could turn it into
The 10
the
that you've
10
had the
that
worst
you had
experience.
nightmares about, because just the thought of the name of it is, those are the Thunderbirds, the Mad Dog 2020s, the Cisco's, that type of flashback inducing shit, like, oh God, I never want to hear that name again. We can do it that way. So I'm open to anything. You can find me anywhere on the internet, Music Playing, Music God Reacts, or the Noise Report. That's Noize. The website is musicgodcjplane.rocks. Everything's going to sort of be pointed there. That's sort of the thing. Noise Report, if you haven't seen it, we just interview people, talk shit. We have fun. I run the interview off the rails normally within the first 45 seconds, and then it just kind of goes wherever. We have the food review channel, Music God Reviews.
I saw that. I saw the
Yeah.
first one that you dropped. I was like, oh,
Yeah, that was
interesting.
just, it's sort of a placeholder at this point. We're
Mhm.
going to get much more adventurous with it. We're going to go to restaurants. We're going to do crazy drinks, right? There's a lot of great places where I live that are outside of the box type of things. We have some great food trucks. We have one place I'm dying to go. It's a popcorn place.
Mm,
And this guy makes about 150 flavors of popcorn.
nice.
But he also has the candies from Japan. He has the sodas and the drinks, like the ranch flavored drink and the grass flavored drink. So he has that kind of stuff. So he's really
Hmm.
he's this place you're gonna get some stuff that's really good and some shit that's really kind of, I don't know if I want to try I don't know if I want to try the barbecue buffalo wings popcorn. Just some flavors that obviously aren't gonna be good on popcorn. And I think with 150 flavors, me at least a few of them that probably are going to be like, yeah, I probably wouldn't put that on popcorn personally, but it is what it is. There's always a
Cho-
weirdo that,
choices are made, and
yeah, you're always going to be that weirdo that wants some, you see the videos where, if they're trolling you or if they're really serious about doing the fucking. I saw one the other day. It was right out of the gate. Like, she put, this is what I'm going to create. And these are all the ingredients. And just by the ingredients sitting on the counter, I was like,
no.
nah, I don't even got to watch that video. I can look at the ingredients and see, I can see Hellman's, cottage cheese, pineapple, dill pickles, lime jello, and tuna fish. There is nothing about those flavors that makes me want to taste them together. And then, of course, she mixed them all together and made one of the old 1970 style jello molds. And I'm like,
God,
yeah, like I don't care how much money I make off a video.
no.
I'm not tasting that. I didn't even, I watched her make it, but I didn't have to because I knew, like, look, there is no part of me for any amount of money that wants to taste cottage cheese, tuna fish, and pineapple. Same
Mhm.
thing. And I
Yeah,
really don't like lime. So the fact that you put this in a lime jello mold, oh,
that sounds like nightmare fuel.
oh yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like, I would not feed this to the people at Guantanamo. Okay,
Mhm.
like this has got to be somewhere in the Geneva Convention for war crimes. Like, okay, page 6, page 12, I don't know, but it's got to be in there somewhere. Like, there's got to be a section about this, but that's the type of dumb shit we're gonna do on there too. But it's gonna be PG because my 13-year-old son is gonna be a part of it. So we're gonna laugh and goof off and have fun. And I encourage everyone to, again, send me ideas. If you see a weird flavor of soda, a weird flavor of chip, a weird flavor of pretzel, or a restaurant that isn't like all the way across the country. I'm not going to California, but just anywhere in the Michigan, Midwest. I will not do Pennsylvania, but Ohio, Indiana, parts
Mhm.
of Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee. Sure, I'll get in the car and go, like, and whatnot. I'm a fat boy, so I love food. But that's me. It just, I know it's not really in a nutshell. It's more in like the size of a oversized
A
gift.
bag of nuts. It's all good.
Yeah, 12 big nuts, but
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah, so I've enjoyed collaborating with CJ. Excited to jump on the loud report.
the loud
Not
list.
or sorry, loud list.
Loud list noise report.
Yeah, so So yeah, appreciate your time. Appreciate just getting more chances to talk with you, and looking forward to chatting with you more soon.
Yeah, we're gonna do it real soon.